Hello, everybody. This is Tanya Milazzo. She works in financial aid here at SUNY Upstate with me, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about financial aid.
Hi, like Barbara Ann said, my name is Tanya Milazzo. She's asked that I talk a little bit about contemporary issues in financial aid, as far as how they're affecting both SUNY Upstate and the entire financial aid community. There are a couple of trends that are affecting us in the financial aid world today. Mostly, when we go to different financial aid conferences and talk to other administrators, the two main things that come up in conversation are how prior year is affecting our jobs on a day-to-day basis, as well as how the borrower defense rule is going to be affecting our jobs next year. So if you don't know about prior year, the federal government has already decided to change the way that the FAFSA works. Previously, you used to have to do a FAFSA in January, between January and March for the next coming year, which usually it could pose a problem for a lot of students because they would not have their taxes done, their parents wouldn't have their taxes done, they wouldn't be able to provide the tax data as relevant as they would need to, so they would have to use estimates and then have to go in later and fix it once their taxes were actually completed. So this year they decided to use prior year, which means the previous year. So now your FAFSA is actually available as of October 1st, and you use the year before. So by October 1st, you really should have your April 15th taxes done. And this is actually kind of a bridge year. So for 16-17, you use 2015 data, and for 17-18, you're also going to use 2015 data. Moving forward, you will use 2 years prior. So, of course, the year that starts with 18, you would use 2016 data. It makes sense. But the nice thing about prior year is that it really allows people a lot more time to get their FAFSA done. It allows a lot more leeway with the disadvantaged students and students who are coming from places that may not have the same kind of capabilities or resources. They can have that extra time in order to get their taxes together, in order to get the financial information together, and to be able to get their FAFSA done on time so that it doesn't really prohibit them from going to college the next year. That's mostly the reason that they did it, was to help those types of students. It's also really nice from an admissions standpoint because it allows us to get packages out sooner. It allows us to say, okay, you're admitted and here's your financial aid package at the exact same time. Whereas we used to have to wait until March or April to get our financial aid packages out. Now we can get them out as early as February, March this year, and even earlier, I think, in the coming years. So that's how prior year is affecting us right now. And honestly, it's a huge deal. We've already started receiving FAFSAs for next year when normally we wouldn't start until middle of January. And it helps us because it gives us a lot longer to analyze the data, and you're kind of accessing people's FAFSA every week between now, I would suppose, October and next August when everybody gets here. But so it's a little extra work, but at the same time, it's nice because we have more time with each individual situation and package. The second trend that I wanted to talk about today was how the borrower defense rule is going to affect us and how that's actually tied to a political climate. So you may have heard about the borrower defense rule. As we know, it was passed by Congress and it came through on November 1st. It basically means that if for some reason a student feels that they were somehow lied to or somehow given a misinterpretation of what the school would be, then they will ultimately can sue the school. And if they win in the borrower defense rule, then they don't have to pay their student loans back. And even worse, the school has to pay their student loans back. So you'd think, well, this only really has to do with proprietary schools or for-profit schools like a ITT Tech or Bryant and Stratton or something where, these students are paying for profit. But the truth is that it really could apply to a SUNY school. If a student says, SUNY made me think that that situation A was how it's going to be when I get to school, and then they find out that it really wasn't like that at all, they could come forward and say, I felt like I was given misinformation in my admissions process, and then all of their loans can be forgiven. And another part about this rule that's really kind of scary is that they said that without even being part of the litigation process, if there are other students that are in the same situation or same program, then they could immediately have their loans forgiven without even asking for them forgiven. Just saying, well, if, student A said that this situation caused him to have his loans returned, then student B would also be in the same exact situation, so we might as well return his loans as well. It's a really scary situation, facing not just financial aid, facing admissions, facing every single part of the institution, because you can say that, any representative of the university has come forward and said, they've told student A that this amazing thing was going to happen when they got to school. And when that amazing thing doesn't happen, even if that representative isn't somebody who works in student affairs, they're still a representative of the university. And now they've given misinformation to the student who can, going forward, sue the school. From what I've heard amongst financial aid circles, there are already ambulance chasing type lawyers that are prepared for when this law comes forward. So which is next summer. So when the borrower defense rule is actually enacted, chances are there will already be lawyers knocking on doors of students saying, did you get the education you were entitled to? Did you get the education you were promised? And if they weren't, they're going to start litigating. They're going to start taking schools to court because they want the money, of course, ambulance chasers. So it's really scary at this moment, but there is kind of a silver lining. There's a situation in which we're not really sure that it's ever actually going to happen. So there's something called the Congressional Review Act, which a lot of people in financial aid are talking about these days, although we'd never talked about it previously. So what that basically means is that Congress can come through and pass a resolution of disapproval, which basically means that they can come into Congress right after the new president, so end of January, early February, and they can say, well, this bill just passed within the last 60 congressional days, which November 1st will be, and they can say, they can vote on whether or not they want this bill to actually go forward. So in February, when Congress gets back together, because it's a Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled House, chances are that if anyone on the Education Committee wants it to happen, they'll put this bill back up, and it only needs to get a 50% approval rating, and the bill will just disappear as if it never happened because it hadn't actually come to fruition yet. So basically, all it's going to take is one person in either one of those parts of government to come forward and say, we would like to relook at the Borrower Defense Rule Act, and then 50% of Congress and 50% of the Senate 50% of the House and 50% of the Senate says that they don't want this to come through, then they will actually throw it all out and it won't exist anymore. If you know what the Republicans kind of stand for and you realize that they're less towards subsidies and more towards people being able to actually pay their loans off and not necessarily helping the student in that situation, chances are you'll realize that if somebody does put this forward, it probably will be thrown out. That's kind of what we're hoping for, I think, and that's mostly because of the broadness of this rule and the broadness of the act. And at the end of the day, it would be much better if they want to pass something like this for proprietary schools, then they do so with much more stipulations and many more rules attached to it, because right now it's so open-ended that it really can affect every single one of us. At this point, we're trying to get the rest of our university involved, both the admissions department as well as legal counsel, because if this rule does go forward next summer, it's going to affect everybody. So I guess that's it. Thank you.